You see a statistic flash across a news report. Worldwide, something like 193,000 homicides happen among young people aged 15 to 29 every single year. It's a shocking number, isn't it? But hidden within these grim figures are certain cases that just stand out. Incidents that have a chilling factor, something far beyond impulsive fights or tragic accidents. These are the murders that hint at something darker, something much more calculated. We usually think of young people making rash decisions, committing crimes of passion, not carrying out cold, hard plans. But some teen murders aren't spontaneous tragedies at all. They're the end result of weeks, sometimes even months, of careful thought, detailed plans, and a terrifying slide into calculated cruelty. These are the cases that make us face a disturbing truth, that the ability for prolonged, premeditated violence isn't just something adults are capable of. When a young life is snuffed out by another young person, it makes us all recoil. There's a tragedy there that just feels amplified by how young everyone involved is. We're left asking why. What could possibly push a teenager, someone still figuring out adulthood, to do something so final? Often, the answers are tangled up in the mess of being a teen. Peer pressure, gangs, sudden rage, or terrible mistakes fueled by drugs or alcohol. And those situations are, on their own, deeply upsetting. But then there's a type of crime within this group that carries an extra layer of horror. This isn't about a quick moment of lost control. It's about a sustained decision to cause harm, a period of thinking it over, where killing isn't a sudden urge, but more like a project to be worked on and carried out. These are the murders where the timeline stretches out, where notes are jotted down, plans are drawn up, and victims are chosen with a horrifying deliberateness. This premeditation, this cold-blooded way of ending a life, is what puts these cases on a completely different and much more unsettling level. It really challenges how we think about young offenders and makes us reevaluate what we thought were the limits of a teenager's mind. The chilling factor isn't just the act itself, but the whole journey to get there, a journey marked by an unsettling amount of forethought and often a terrifying sense of anticipation. The murder of Brianna Ghey in the UK is a stark, heartbreaking example of this chilling factor in play. Brianna, a 16-year-old transgender girl, was found fatally stabbed in a public park on February 11, 2023. Her death wasn't a random encounter or a teenage argument that got out of hand. As the investigation would show, it was a pre-planned and brutally carried-out attack. The killers, Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe, were both just 15 at the time. What came out during their trial was a horrifying story of long and careful planning. For months, Jenkinson and Ratcliffe had sent thousands of messages back and forth, detailing dark fantasies about murder and torture. Brianna wasn't their only target. They actually had a list of other potential victims. Jenkinson had become friends with Brianna, earning her trust, and it was this manufactured friendship that she used to lure Brianna to Culcheth Linear Park on that awful day. The details are gut-wrenching. Brianna was stabbed 28 times in what prosecutors called an extremely brutal and punishing attack. The reasons behind it were complex and deeply disturbing. The court found that sadism was the main driver for Jenkinson, while transphobia was a secondary motive for Ratcliffe. This wasn't just a plan to kill, it was a plan filled with a desire to make someone suffer. The level of deception was astounding. After luring Brianna, they attacked her. Their violent outburst was only stopped when dog walkers came by. Afterwards, they tried to create alibis and cover their tracks, which just shows how calculated they were. Even before the fatal stabbing, Jenkinson had tried to kill Brianna once before by poisoning her. Brianna survived, thinking she just had appendicitis. The sheer number of messages, the kill list, the earlier attempt, and the brutal way she was finally killed all point to a chilling level of sustained, calculated cruelty that's just so hard to grasp in offenders so young. When the verdicts came in, neither Jenkinson nor Ratcliffe showed any emotion. That detail just amplified the public's horror and highlighted their profound lack of remorse. What really takes certain teen murders from tragic to profoundly chilling is that element of prolonged, careful planning. Most homicides by young people are reactive or impulsive. They happen in the heat of the moment, often driven by immediate distress, fear, or anger. But the cases that really haunt us are those where the killing wasn't a sudden explosion, but a carefully thought-out project. This premeditation can show up in different ways. It might be weeks or even months of discussion between the killers, like in Brianna Ghey's case, where thousands of messages laid out dark fantasies and possible methods. It can include making kill lists, checking out locations, or getting weapons long before the act itself. In some situations, perpetrators research ways to kill or how to avoid getting caught, showing a chilling foresight and a rational, though horrifying, approach to their planned crime. Think about the Slender Man stabbing case in Wisconsin back in 2014. Two 12-year-old girls, Anissa Weier and Morgan Geyser, lured their friend into the woods and stabbed her 19 times. Miraculously, the victim survived. Their motive? To please a fictional internet character, Slender Man. What was particularly disturbing was the planning. The girls had reportedly been plotting the attack for months, talking about it in code, and even had previous plans that they didn't go through with. One of the girls told investigators she'd been planning to stab her friend 5 months before it actually happened. This wasn't a sudden whim. It was a sustained, shared delusion that turned into a concrete, violent plan. This kind of premeditation is scarier because it points to a deeper, more settled darkness. It means the young person had so many chances to think, to reconsider, to step back from the edge, but instead chose to keep going down that violent path. It suggests a level of detachment and a capacity for cold calculation that society just isn't ready to associate with teenagers. The chilling factor here is that journey from thought to action, a journey taken with a disturbing clarity of purpose. Beyond the planning, another key thing that defines these especially haunting teen murders is the presence of calculated cruelty, often bordering on or clearly involving sadism. This isn't just about the act of killing, but about how the killing is done, and the obvious intention to inflict the most suffering, whether that's physical or psychological. In Brianna Ghey's case, the sheer brutality, 28 stab wounds, points to more than just wanting to kill. It suggests a frenzied, punishing assault. The judge specifically mentioned the sadistic nature of the crime, especially regarding Scarlett Jenkinson, who was described as having enjoyed the killing. This element of getting pleasure or satisfaction from the victim's suffering is a classic sign of sadistic violence. The James Bulger case in the UK in 1993, even though it involved even younger perpetrators, 10-year-olds Robert Thompson and John Venables, also had horrific elements of calculated cruelty. 2-year-old James was abducted, tortured, and then left on a railway line to be hit by a train, trying to make his death look like an accident. The injuries inflicted on him before he died were extensive and showed prolonged torment. While the motivations of killers that young are incredibly complex and still debated, the violence inflicted on James Bulger was undeniably cruel and sustained. This calculated cruelty can also show up in how a victim is psychologically tormented. Luring a victim by pretending to be a friend, like Jenkinson did with Brianna Ghey, is a profound betrayal that adds a layer of emotional cruelty to the physical violence. The deception involved in acts like that is, in itself, a form of calculated harm. Finding this kind of cruelty in young offenders is deeply disturbing because it goes against our most basic ideas about childhood and adolescence. Teenage years can be full of intense emotions, sure, but the capacity for cold, detached, and even pleasure-seeking cruelty is something society struggles to understand in people so young. It signals a severe lack of empathy and a disturbing inner world that has allowed these tendencies to grow and take root. These aren't just acts of violence, they're expressions of a deeply unsettling malevolence. A major and truly chilling factor in many premeditated teen murders is the sophisticated way they use manipulation and deception, often using the very tools of modern teen social life, friendships and online communication. The ability to spin a web of lies, to exploit trust, and to use social platforms to plan violence adds a disturbing layer of cold calculation to these crimes. In Brianna Ghey's case, Scarlett Jenkinson carefully built a friendship with Brianna. This wasn't a real bond, but a strategic move designed to make Brianna vulnerable. Jenkinson used this friendship to lure Brianna to the secluded park where she was murdered. The text messages between Jenkinson and Ratcliffe revealed just how much planning went into it, including their discussions about how to get Brianna alone. After the murder, they even tried to create fake alibis by sending messages from Brianna's phone, a clear act of calculated deception to try and avoid getting caught. The Slender Man case also shows the role of shared belief and manipulation, though in a different way. The two girls manipulated their victim, a close friend, by luring her into the woods by pretending it was a game. Their shared belief in the fictional character Slender Man became a tool for justifying and planning their violent actions. The internet, the very place they found the Slender Man story, played a huge part in shaping their delusional worldview and, arguably, in the planning stages of their attack. The internet has certainly opened up new avenues for this kind of manipulation. Online personas can be faked, trust can be feigned through constant messaging, and plans can be coordinated with a level of secrecy that was much harder to achieve before. We even see things like internet banging, where online taunts and threats blow up into real-world violence. It shows how social media can become a stage for planning and inciting harm. Young people who see a lot of violent online content might be more likely to get involved in serious crimes. The speed and reach of social media can make conflicts bigger and, in the wrong hands, become a tool for orchestrating devastating results. This ability for complex deception and manipulation in teenagers is chilling because it shows a level of social cunning and moral detachment that's deeply unsettling. It's one thing for an adult with years of experience to be manipulative, but to see it used so effectively, and for such horrifying reasons, by individuals who are still figuring out social norms and consequences, is profoundly disturbing. It shatters that image of teenage naivety and reveals a potential for calculated duplicity that makes these crimes particularly haunting. Trying to understand the perpetrators in these chilling cases of premeditated teen murder is a complex and often uncomfortable task. What leads a young person down such a dark, calculated path? While every case is different, some common threads and disturbing traits do pop up. Often, these individuals show a profound lack of empathy. This was clear in the Brianna Ghey case, where neither Jenkinson nor Ratcliffe showed any visible emotion when they were sentenced. This emotional detachment lets them plan and carry out horrific acts without the internal stop buttons that remorse or compassion would normally provide. Psychopathy, though it's a term we have to use carefully with teenagers, can be a factor in some young people who commit violent crimes. It's marked by an inability to feel for others and a tendency towards manipulative behavior. A fascination with violence, torture, or serial killers is another theme that keeps coming up. Jenkinson and Ratcliffe reportedly shared these interests, talking about them a lot in their messages. For some, diving deep into dark subjects can blur the lines between fantasy and reality, or worse, give them a twisted kind of inspiration or validation for their violent thoughts. The Slender Man case is a perfect example of how online horror stories can, in vulnerable individuals, get tangled up with real-world actions. Things in their environment, like exposure to severe abuse, neglect, or a chaotic home life, can also play a part in violent tendencies developing in some kids who go on to kill. But it's important to say, this isn't always the case. Many young offenders in these premeditated cases, like the perpetrators in the Brianna Ghey case, whose parents were professionals, come from backgrounds that seem pretty stable on the surface. This makes their actions even more baffling and challenges any easy explanations. Sometimes there's a dynamic between two or more perpetrators, what was described in the Ghey case as a deadly influence on each other. In these partnerships, dark fantasies can get amplified, and the determination to act can become stronger. One person might be the main instigator, while the other becomes a willing, or perhaps manipulated, accomplice. This shared secrecy and planning can create a powerful, though destructive, bond. The chilling factor with these perpetrators is that stark contrast between how young they are and the adult-like evil they show. Their actions force us to face the reality that profound psychological disturbances and an ability for meticulously planned, cruel acts aren't limited to any specific age group. It shatters that comforting idea of childhood innocence and reveals that the potential for extreme darkness can show up disturbingly early. While cases like Brianna Ghey's are shocking in their own right, they unfortunately share disturbing similarities with other teen murders that involve premeditation and calculated cruelty. Looking at these broader patterns helps us understand the unique things that make these crimes so haunting. One key pattern is the betrayal of trust, often targeting victims who are friends or acquaintances of the perpetrators. Brianna Ghey was lured by someone she thought was a friend. In the Slender Man stabbing, the victim was a close friend of her attackers, invited to a sleepover that became the setup for the assault. This violation of a basic social bond, friendship, just makes the horror and the sense of treachery even worse. Another recurring theme is the influence of external stories or subcultures, whether it's the online horror mythology in the Slender Man case, or a shared fascination with violence and serial killers like Jenkinson and Ratcliffe had. These outside influences can offer a framework, a justification, or even a twisted kind of encouragement for violent thoughts. The internet, with its huge and often unregulated spaces, can become a breeding ground for these dark fascinations. The element of fantasy spilling over into reality is also pretty common. The detailed planning sessions, the kill lists, the discussions of torture, these often start as dark fantasies. In most people, these thoughts stay just that, thoughts. But in these chilling cases, a line is crossed where the fantasy becomes a blueprint for real-world action. This shift from dark thoughts to actual violence is a critical and terrifying step. Take the case of the River Valley High School killing in Singapore in 2021. A 16-year-old boy who was suffering from depression meticulously planned an attack. He bought an axe and researched efficient killing methods online. He then attacked and killed a 13-year-old schoolmate he didn't even know. The Chief Justice noted the chilling degree of premeditation and a cold and calculated approach. Here again, we see methodical planning and a disturbing detachment. The murder of James Bulger by two 10-year-old boys in 1993, though it involved younger children, also had elements of abduction, sustained cruelty, and an attempt to hide the crime. It sent shockwaves because of the age of the perpetrators and the brutality inflicted on a toddler. The public outcry and the struggle to understand how children could commit such acts echo the societal disturbance caused by later cases of premeditated teen violence. These cases, even with their different backgrounds, share a core chilling factor: the methodical, deliberate, and often cruel destruction of life by young individuals who, by all societal expectations, should be navigating the ups and downs of adolescence, not meticulously plotting murder. They reveal a disturbing capacity for cold-blooded violence that goes way beyond typical youthful impulsiveness. The details of these cases are, without a doubt, hard to hear. But understanding the factors that lead to such extreme violence is an important step. If you're finding this analysis insightful, please think about liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into complex cases. Your support helps us keep creating content that goes beyond the headlines. And please, share your thoughts in the comments below, respectfully of course. What aspects of these cases do you find most unsettling? Teen murders that involve long-term planning and calculated cruelty strike such a deep and disturbing chord in society for so many reasons. They aren't just individual tragedies. They plug into some of our deepest anxieties about youth, safety, and the very nature of good and evil. Firstly, these crimes shatter our basic assumptions about childhood and adolescence. We tend to link youth with innocence, impulsivity, and a moral compass that's still developing. The idea that a teenager can engage in cold, drawn-out planning of a murder, often with sadistic elements, is profoundly jarring. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that severe psychological issues and the capacity for extreme, calculated violence don't just belong to adults. Secondly, they highlight how vulnerable victims can be, especially when they're targeted by those they trust, friends, classmates. This betrayal of trust is a particularly hard thing for communities to deal with. It eats away at the sense of safety in everyday interactions and places that should be secure, like schools or local parks. The murder of Brianna Ghey, a transgender teen, also highlighted the dangers faced by marginalized youth, where premeditated violence can be made even worse by hate-fueled motives. Thirdly, these cases often reveal the darker side of modern connectivity. The role of the internet and social media in some of these plots, whether as a source of violent ideas, a tool for planning, or a platform for manipulation, raises big concerns. The online world, while offering huge benefits, can also become an echo chamber for dark thoughts and a space where harmful subcultures can grow, sometimes with devastating real-world results. Fourthly, the apparent lack of remorse often shown by these young perpetrators is deeply unsettling. It suggests a profound disconnect from how serious their actions are and the suffering they've caused. This emotional emptiness can be more terrifying than the violence itself, as it doesn't offer much hope for understanding or redemption in the usual sense. Finally, these cases force a kind of societal soul-searching. They bring up difficult questions about youth mental health, the influence of media and online content, the signs that might have been missed, and whether our justice systems are equipped to deal with young offenders who commit such awful crimes. The debate around naming child offenders, as we saw in the Brianna Ghey case, shows this tension between public interest, the need for understanding, and the long-term effects on everyone involved. These murders aren't just news stories. They become cautionary tales, grim reminders of a disturbance in society. They haunt us because they represent something profoundly wrong, a chilling departure from what we believe, or perhaps hope, young people to be. The echo they leave behind is one of sadness, fear, and a pressing need to understand the chilling factors that make these teen murders so terrifyingly different. Looking into the heart of these exceptionally disturbing teen murders is a sobering experience. It's a path that takes us away from simple answers and forces us to face the chilling reality that not all violence by young people comes from a sudden impulse. The careful planning, the calculated cruelty, the manipulation, and the profound lack of empathy we see in cases like Brianna Ghey's, the Slender Man stabbing, and others, set them apart in a truly horrifying way. These are not crimes that can be easily brushed aside or quickly understood. They make us look deeper, question our assumptions about adolescence, and stay aware of the many influences, both online and offline, that can shape young minds. The chilling factor isn't just about how shocking the act itself is, but the cold, deliberate, and sustained intent behind it. It's a factor that leaves a lasting scar on all of us, reminding us of the dark capabilities that can exist, even in the young. These stories are a stark reminder of how important it is to recognize warning signs, encourage empathy, and create environments where young people feel safe, understood, and are guided away from such destructive paths. The victims of these crimes, like Brianna Ghey, deserve to be remembered not just for the horrific way they died, but for the lives they lived and the potential that was stolen from them. Thank you for joining me in exploring this difficult but important topic. If this video has made you think, please consider subscribing for more content that tries to understand the complexities of the human condition, even at its darkest. Don't forget to like this video if you found it informative, and share it with others who might be interested in this subject. Your engagement truly helps the channel. Stay safe and stay informed.